Okay, all. So we need to talk about variables today. So this is variables.py, written by me, blah, 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 usual comments, right? Okay, so I have kind of my header comments in here. And now I need to talk about the idea of what a variable is. So Python has a really easy structure for variables, but it is sometimes a little bit confusing. So let me make a variable. I'm going to call it x, and I'm going to set it equal to 10 to start this off. So this is a numeric variable type. So numeric variables include integer types, which is called int. And you can see that Rappel is kind of helpfully going along here. And you can click the little information thing if you want. This is about the integer function right now. So let me just say that int is both a variable type and a function in Python. In this case, I have x is 10. So if I want to say print out x, I can just print x. And do keep in mind, there is a difference between printing x with little single quotes around it and printing x without them. So if you print x with single quotes around it, oh gosh, I told you not to do that, so I won't do that. Okay. There is a difference here. So this first one, with the single quotes, x is x is in this case a string, which is a text variable that we'll get into later. And in this one where x doesn't have the single quotes, so in this case, x is a variable's name. And so what the interpreter is going to do is it's going to see this x, and then it's going to go collect the thing in its memory that's named x, and that thing in its memory is going to have 10 in it. So if you're used to other computer languages, there are two steps happening in this line. And the two steps that are happening in this line are declaration and initialization. And they're both happening in one step here. So Python doesn't actually have a convenient way for you to just declare a variable and then not put anything in it. Python also doesn't do as much distinguishing between type as it could. So other languages are what are called strongly typed, and in those cases they enforce which kind of variable you're keeping in here, and they won't let you change it. Python is not strongly typed, it's weakly typed, which means that it will go ahead and let you say have x is 10, and then later x can be 1.8, and then later x can be a car. Like, it doesn't care at all. It'll very happily let you overwrite things. It'll let you change type really on the fly, which is both a blessing and a curse. So in this case, when I hit run, I'm going to see the results of these print lines in order. And so this first one on line 12 here is just going to print out an x. So I'm going to see literally just a character x. And then this print line from line 14 is going to actually print 10. And then, interestingly, line 8 is executed, but it doesn't output anything to the console. So I'm seeing x, this x is coming from line 12, this 10 is coming from line 14. Okay, so that's the numeric type for integer. There's another numeric type, which is float. And float is referred to as float. And essentially for people, who are used to using more math, a float is a non-integer number. So 9.2 is a float, or blah, 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 right? And if we want to print floats out, we just call print on them. It works exactly the same way. And at this point, we're probably losing track of which things we have in here. So let me show you an easy way to put which variable you're printing. So I'm printing y, and I would also like to print other y. And now what this is gonna whine at me. So this is why knowing types is important. So let me make that a little bigger. Okay, so it's saying it can only concatenate string, not float, to string. And so what's going on there is that this y with the little quotes around it is a text type variable, a string. And this y without is a number. And so this is saying, dude, I don't know how to add text and numbers. That doesn't make any sense to me. So if we want to kind of force this, we can just actually throw a comma in here, and it'll just do this. This is not a good method. Okay, so there are better ways to get this printing. So this is print y and y, right? So we're trying to print both the display y and also the value y. And there are better ways to do this, but this one's fast, so I'm going to use it today. The very next little lecture I'm going to make is about string formatting. So if you want to look at that, go check that talk out. So see you lecture on string formatting. Okay, so that's 2 of the numeric types. There's a third numeric type for complex numbers. If you're mathy and you want to use it, go ahead and look it up. The only comment I'll add to that is I'm going to say complex type exists and j instead of I. So if you're used to math class where you do 2 plus 3i, in writing that out in Python, it would be 3 plus 2j instead. But otherwise, it doesn't. It works just fine. It's all natively supported. Okay, so that's my numeric variables. Text variables are strings, which are known by str in the code. And we've actually used a bunch of strings. So let me say that s is hello. And if I want to print out s, I just pass s like this. And now we'll get hello printed out. And that's coming from this line 28, not from line 27. So 27 is doing the initialize and, well, declare and initialize the variable s to this little set of letters called hello, and then 28 is printing it. Should be noted, if you want to do something maybe like I'm stuck in this computer. Help. There's a obvious problem here in that the single quote here is getting screwed up with the single quote there, and I kind of don't know how to get around it. One thing you can do is you can do double quotes around the entire thing, and then single quotes will print just like they normally would. Oops, I forgot a period in here. There's another way to do that, which is to do what's called an escape. So you can put a slash to escape it. There's a number of things you can escape. That does make it hard to print out slashes. So if you want to print out a slash, you do a double slash to get one. those are a little bit complex. If you look up escape characters, that's kind of the source, or the phrase you might Google to get some more information. And there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do with string formatting, so you can get this to kind of change color and stuff. There's a whole bunch of, that's a very deep rabbit hole that you can feel free to dive down. For right now, I just don't want you to be frustrated by the stupid single quote, double quote kind of thing. Okay, so that's text type variables. That is, to my knowledge, all there is in Python, but I might be surprised. There's other types of variables. So there's sequences. And the sequence example that I'm going to give to start off with is a list. And I'm just going to say more on this later. We'll get super involved with lists. Oh, what the heck? Let me give you just a very simple example. So if you want to make, oops. Oh, well, this is maybe good. So I'm just overwriting the list that I had earlier, or the variable that I had earlier. So remember, earlier x was 10, and now I'm rewriting x. So this isn't actually a declaration and initialization. This is just a reassign here. But if I want to say print this out, I can just do that with the same. So notice that x was an integer before, and now it's a list, and Python doesn't really care. A list is a thing we'll use a whole bunch. If you're used to coding in some other language, this is an array. Ish. I really should say it. Like, emphasis on the ish there. Arrays in other languages have lots of, I'm not sure that's spelled right. Arrays in other languages have lots of properties that lists kind of don't. Some languages have both arrays and lists. That's a whole rabbit hole too. For right now, just assume if you want to make a list, you put it in square brackets and put stuff inside of it. We'll use them for a bunch of stuff later. Let's see, other variable types. There's, oops, forgot my octothorpe. So there are also maps. There are also booleans. There are also sets. There are also binary types. And these are types of variables. So, there's a whole thing we'll have to do with maps and dictionaries later. Booleans we'll get into maybe just a little bit in a second here. Sets are kind of a deep dive, so we'll probably avoid that for a while. Binary variable types are kind of a mess, so I'm going to avoid that altogether. But for right now, what you need to know is that type matters a little bit, but Python will let you get away with having variables change type throughout your code. So you just have to be a little careful. You can't name everything X. Good naming conventions are a good idea. So it really does matter that you maybe pick decent and representative names for things. This example is a little bit short on that. Just be aware that longer, more descriptive names are possible. Do not try to name your variables int. This does not work. Oh God, please tell me it doesn't work. This shouldn't work. There are a whole bunch of kind of reserved names. Oh God, it actually works. You shouldn't do this. Apparently you can, but you shouldn't. This is a terrible idea. Don't do this. I'm deleting that because I can't stand to look at it. So there are a bunch of reserved names, like you can't name things true or false. You shouldn't name things after things that are part of the code. You probably won't know what they are for now, except if the compiler or the IDE flags them for color, right? So if you type a variable name out and it's a funny color, probably best to avoid that name. Also here at the end, I should really add, I suppose, that we can check what kind of thing a variable is. So for instance, since we reassigned this x, we probably want to figure out just what kind of thing that is. And one way we can do that is we can use the type function on it. And so what that's going to do is that's going to tell me what that last thing is. So that last thing is a member of the list class, whatever that means. And let's see, so I had a variable called s earlier, and s was a string type thing. And if I ask about y, I think y was a float. So I see, okay, it's a float. Don't worry about what class means here right now. We'll talk about it later. Just know that this bit that follows is what variable type you're looking at. So if you're having type mismatch problems, you can use this as a nice diagnosis. Another kind of diagnosis thing you can do is you can get the is instance. And so the way that is instance works is you might say is y an integer type. And so it's going to say that it's this one, the class float, is coming from the type of y. And then this is asking, is y an integer? And the answer is false. Y is not an integer. So then I might ask, is y a float? And it'll tell me y is indeed a float. So those are our two checking methods. Type returns, right, which kind of thing it is. And is instance returns either true or false. And this other thing can be like a little list. So if you want to make a list, we can say, is this one of an integer or a float? And then I just need to make sure I have enough parentheses there. And it is, y is either an integer or a float. In this case, it's a float, so I get a true result back from this. So that's the thing you're checking goes in the first slot of the is instance function, and then a list of things you're checking against goes in the second. Oh, sorry, that's not a, I lied. That's not a list, it's a thing called a tuple, but don't sweat it. We'll talk about the distinction between lists and tuples later. I wonder actually, now that I'm thinking about it, can you feed it a list? No, there we go. Cool. It's warning us some of this stuff, right? So interpreting errors is a big part of the course. I get these. So here I have a type error, right, which is saying there's some kind of typing problem, and it says for the function is instance, argument 2, right, so the thing in the second slot must either be a type or a tuple of types. And this right now is a list of types, and that's not allowed, but a tuple is. So we can do that, and it'll go back to working. Oh no, it'll go back to, oh good, we're getting some more errors. So unexpected EOF while parsing, that EOF means end of file. So it got to the end of the file while it was still trying to print something. That usually means you've forgotten a parenthesis or something someplace along the lines. Okay, so that's what I've got on variables for now. There's obviously a lot more we can dive into here.